My name is Brooke, and at 35 years old, I never thought I'd be the family member everyone would suddenly decide to cut off. For over a decade, I was the shoulder to cry on the emergency bank and the mediator for every family crisis. Then, one ordinary Tuesday, my phone lit up with a group message from my father. "We think it's best you step away for now." Just like that, I was excommunicated from my own family. The strangest part? My Aunt Margaret reacted in a way nobody expected. Before I tell you how my own family betrayed me, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever felt undervalued by the people you love most. Growing up in Meadowbrook, a quiet middle-class suburb outside of Philadelphia, my childhood home looked picture-perfect from the outside. Our two-story colonial with the well-kept lawn and seasonal wreaths on the door hid the complex dynamics that would eventually fracture our family. My father Thomas was an accountant at a respected firm. He brought the precision and high standards of his profession home, expecting excellence in everything we did. Emotional expressiveness wasn't his strong suit. Instead, his love language was achievement and financial stability. "Brooke, feelings don't pay the bills," he'd say whenever I tried to discuss anything emotional with him. By age 10, I learned that earning his approval meant bringing home straight A's and staying out of trouble. My mother Diana existed in my father's shadow. Her anxiety manifested in constant worrying and an inability to make decisions without his input. She relied heavily on me from the time I was young. "Brooke, sweetheart, could you talk to your father about extending your sister's curfew? He listens to you," she would whisper, avoiding conflict at all costs. By 13, I became her confidant, listening to marital complaints she should have shared with a friend or therapist, not her teenage daughter. Then there were my siblings. My brother Kyle, 2 years younger, was the definition of troubled. By high school, he was experimenting with substances, skipping classes, and hanging out with kids who were already on probation officers' radar. Yet somehow, he remained my parents' blind spot. "He's just finding himself," my mother would defend, while my father threw money at the problem, paying for private tutors and later expensive lawyers. No matter what Kyle did, my parents circled the wagons around him. My sister Amanda, the baby of the family at 5 years my junior, grew up watching this dynamic and learned quickly how to work the system. Pretty and charismatic, she mastered the art of getting what she wanted while contributing minimal effort. "But Brooke always handles the holiday planning," she'd say with a practiced pout when asked to help with family gatherings. Amanda floated through life expecting doors to open and problems to resolve without her involvement. The only relative who saw through the dysfunction was my father's sister, Aunt Margaret. Unlike my father, she had warmth and emotional intelligence. During family gatherings, she'd catch my eye across the room when my mother asked me to serve dinner after I'd already cooked it, or when my father bragged about Kyle's mediocre accomplishments while ignoring my achievements. "You deserve better," she whispered once while helping me wash dishes after a Thanksgiving where I'd done everything. "Your worth isn't measured by how much you can give." But I didn't know how to be anything except the family fixer. From an early age, I was the mediator during my parents' frequent arguments. "Brooke, tell your mother that refinancing the mortgage makes perfect financial sense," my father would say, using me as a translator for conversations they should have had directly with each other. By 8 years old, I could diffuse tensions with humor or distraction skills no child should need to master. My own personality developed in response to these demands. I became hyper-responsible, reliable to a fault, and constantly anxious about maintaining family peace. My straight A record throughout school wasn't just about academic interest, it was one less thing for my parents to worry about. "At least we never have to worry about Brooke," became their refrain, not realizing this praise actually locked me into a role I couldn't escape. After graduating with honors from Penn State with a marketing degree, I landed a job at a digital marketing agency in Philadelphia. Within 5 years, I worked my way up to senior marketing manager, known for handling difficult clients and impossible deadlines. My professional reputation echoed my family role, dependable Brooke, who always comes through. While building my career, the family dynamics intensified rather than diminished. Geographic distance wasn't an option since I remained in the Philadelphia area. The weekly family dinners became a stage for ongoing dramas. Kyle would show up asking for money to cover his rent after losing another job. Amanda would announce expensive plans she'd made, subtly hinting she needed financial help. My father complained about retirement concerns, while my mother worried about health issues that never received proper medical attention. The requests grew more frequent and substantial. Brooke, can you look over Kyle's resume again? Turned into, Brooke, Kyle needs $6,000 for legal fees. Amanda wants your opinion on wedding colors, evolved into, Amanda expects you to pay for the catering since her fiancé lost his job. Through it all, I maintained a secret hope that someday my sacrifice would be recognized, that my family would one day see me, really see me, and realize what I'd been doing all these years. That recognition never came. Instead, the pattern escalated. When I received a promotion to marketing director last year, my mother spent 3 minutes congratulating me before launching into an hour-long discussion about Kyle's latest crisis. My father responded to my news with, "That's nice. Does this mean you can help more with Amanda's wedding?" My best friend Sophia noticed the pattern long before I admitted it to myself. After watching me cancel our weekend getaway plans to help Amanda shop for wedding dresses, she confronted me over coffee. "Brooke, when was the last time anyone in your family did something for you? Just you, not because they needed something in return." I couldn't answer her. The question lingered, planting a seed of awareness I wasn't yet ready to nurture. As my 30th birthday approached, I received a promising opportunity. Jake, a creative director I'd been dating for almost a year, suggested we move in together. "I love you," he said, "and I think we could build something real." For once, I allowed myself to consider my own desires, my own future. I tentatively began apartment hunting with him, imagining a life centered on my own happiness. The universe seemed to test this newfound focus on myself almost immediately. That same week, my mother developed debilitating migraines that the doctors struggled to diagnose. Without hesitation, I put my apartment search on hold, took unpaid leave from work, and moved temporarily back to my parents' home to help. Jake was understanding but concerned. "Just don't forget about yourself completely," he cautioned. Little did I know this would become the first in a series of family crises that would completely derail my personal life and ultimately lead to that devastating group message. The 2 years before my family cut me off were a masterclass in escalating demands and diminishing appreciation. What started with temporary help during my mother's health crisis became a permanent state of financial and emotional servitude. My mother's migraine condition improved slightly with medication, but her anxiety about being alone didn't. "Brooke, could you stay just one more week?" turned into another week, then a month. I extended my leave from work twice before finally returning to the office, but continued spending every weekend at my parents' home cooking meals for the week and handling household maintenance my father didn't have time for, despite being semi-retired. My boss was remarkably patient, but I could see the strain my divided attention was causing. "Your work is still excellent, Brooke," she said during my performance review, "but the team needs you to be more present." I promised to improve, adding another layer of guilt to my already overflowing plate. Meanwhile, Kyle created the biggest crisis yet. After driving under the influence, he crashed his car into a roadside guardrail. Thankfully, no one was injured, but the legal repercussions were severe, especially since it wasn't his first offense. The family gathered in my parents' living room like a war council, with all eyes turning to me when the subject of legal fees came up. "The attorney wants $30,000, my father announced, looking directly at me. "Your mother and I have some savings, but not enough." I sat there stunned. "That's my entire emergency fund," I said quietly, "plus some of my retirement savings." Kyle looked at the floor while Amanda examined her manicure. My mother twisted her hands anxiously. "We wouldn't ask if there were any other options," my father replied, as though this were a reasonable request rather than financial devastation. I agreed to loan $20,000 to Kyle's defense fund, knowing deep down I'd never see that money again. To access my retirement funds, I had to pay an early withdrawal penalty and taxes, effectively losing about 30% of the value, but no one in my family acknowledged this additional cost. The withdrawal from my accounts coincided with Jake asking when we'd resume our apartment search. "I can't right now," I explained. "Family emergency." His patience finally reached its limit. "Brooke, there's always a family emergency. When will your life be the priority?" I didn't have an answer, and our relationship became another casualty of my family obligations. We broke up 3 weeks later with Jake saying words that would haunt me: "You can't pour from an empty cup, and yours has been dry for years." With my romantic relationship on hold indefinitely, I threw myself even deeper into family responsibilities. Amanda announced her engagement to Derek, a man she'd been dating for only 6 months. While my parents expressed some concern about the rushed timeline, they were quickly distracted by wedding planning, which naturally fell to me. "You have such good taste, Brooke," Amanda gushed, handing me bridal magazines. "And you know everyone in the area from your marketing work. You could get us discounts." I became the unofficial wedding planner, spending weekends visiting venues, negotiating with caterers, and designing invitations. When the conversation turned to finances, my parents made vague comments about helping where they can, before my father pulled me aside. "Your mother and I weren't expecting another wedding so soon after putting Kyle through rehab," he explained. "We were hoping you could contribute to the wedding costs, since Amanda is your only sister." That contribution ballooned to covering half the wedding expenses, approximately $25,000. My credit cards reached their limits, and my savings dwindled to almost nothing. The physical toll became impossible to ignore. I developed insomnia, often lying awake until 3 or 4 in the morning before dragging myself to work. I lost 15 pounds without trying my clothes hanging loosely on my frame. Anxiety attacks became so frequent that I kept emergency medication in my car desk and purse. Sophia staged what amounted to an intervention after I nearly fainted during our lunch date. "This has to stop," she said, gripping my hand across the table. "You're killing yourself for people who don't even notice." "They're my family," I responded automatically, the justification worn smooth from overuse. "And what about you? Don't you deserve a family who takes care of you too?" The question lingered but didn't change my behavior. I continued showing up, solving problems, writing checks, and silencing my growing resentment. The breaking point came during Thanksgiving last year. I'd taken on the entire meal preparation for 15 family members, including extended relatives. I spent 3 days cooking and cleaning, maxed out another credit card for groceries, and even took time off work to ensure everything would be perfect. The day itself unfolded with predictable dysfunction. Kyle arrived late and slightly intoxicated despite his ongoing probation. Amanda and Derek stayed for precisely 90 minutes before leaving for another commitment without helping with cleanup. My mother spent the gathering complaining about the seating arrangement despite doing nothing to help plan it. My father watched football in the living room, emerging only for the meal itself, as I stood alone in the kitchen surrounded by dirty dishes while everyone else relaxed or departed. Something inside me finally snapped. I walked into the living room where my parents were now both watching TV and said the words I'd been swallowing for years. "I can't keep doing this. I'm drowning and none of you seem to notice or care." The room went silent. My father muted the television, looking genuinely confused. "Doing what?" "Everything." My voice shook. "The money, the time, the emotional support I'm always giving, and no one ever asks what I need." My mother immediately teared up, her go-to response when uncomfortable emotions surfaced. My father frowned, crossing his arms defensively. "I thought we were a family," my mother said. "Families help each other." "When have any of you helped me?" I asked, the question hanging in the air like smoke. My father cleared his throat. "You're being dramatic, Brooke. No one forced you to help with Kyle or Amanda's wedding. You offered." The gaslighting was so blatant I actually laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "Did I, or was I manipulated into it with guilt and family obligation?" "If helping your family is such a burden, maybe you should focus on yourself for a while," my father replied coldly. I left soon after the conversation unresolved, but something fundamental had shifted. For the first time, I'd voiced my resentment, named the inequality, and the response had been dismissal rather than recognition. The illusion that my sacrifice would eventually be acknowledged finally shattered. What I didn't realize was that my family was already constructing a narrative in which I was the villain of the story, not its long-suffering hero. The foundation was being laid for what would come next, the ultimate betrayal from the very people I'd given everything to support. December 10th began like any ordinary Tuesday. I woke up early, prepared for a client presentation, and grabbed coffee from my favorite shop on the way to the office. The meeting went well. We landed a significant new account, and I felt a rare sense of professional satisfaction as I returned to my desk. That fleeting moment of happiness made what happened next even more jarring. During my lunch break, I checked my phone and saw a notification from our family group chat. This wasn't unusual. The chat typically contained updates about weekend plans or photos from Amanda, who had recently returned from her honeymoon. What was unusual was seeing my father as the sender. He rarely initiated conversations, especially in group settings. I opened the message and felt the ground shift beneath me. After much discussion, we think it's best if Brooke steps away from family gatherings for a while. Her negative attitude and controlling behavior have created an uncomfortable atmosphere for everyone. We need space to heal from the tension she's caused. I blinked, certain I had misread. I checked who else was included in the message: my mother Kyle, Amanda, Aunt Margaret, my grandparents, 2 cousins, and several family friends. My father had essentially announced my excommunication to our entire social circle. My hands shook so violently, I had to put the phone down on my desk. The sick, hollow feeling in my stomach spread until I felt numb from my core to my fingertips. I refreshed the screen irrationally, hoping the message would disappear or transform into something more benign. Instead, new responses began appearing beneath my father's proclamation: Kyle. Honestly, it's about time. I'm tired of walking on eggshells around her. Amanda. Same. David and I have been avoiding family dinners because of the negativity. My own mother. We love you, Brooke, but your outburst at Thanksgiving showed us you need help. This distance is for your benefit too. Each new notification felt like another knife sliding between my ribs. But the true devastation came from seeing reactions to these messages: thumbs up, heart emojis, and even laughing faces from relatives I'd helped move lent money to or supported through their own crises. I sat frozen watching this public execution of my character unfold in real time. Through my shock, I noticed my Aunt Margaret was the only person not responding or reacting to the messages. Everyone else seemed eager to pile on. My cousin Jennifer, whom I'd helped pay for community college classes just last year, always thought she was so superior to the rest of us with her fancy job. A family friend I'd known since childhood. Classic narcissist behavior, making everything about herself. Each comment revealed that this wasn't a spontaneous decision. They had been discussing me behind my back for weeks, perhaps months, constructing an alternative reality where I was toxic rather than exploited. I scrolled back further in the group chat and discovered I had been removed and then re-added specifically for this announcement. There were hundreds of prior messages I'd never seen dating back to the day after Thanksgiving, all focused on dissecting my attitude problem and unreasonable behavior. My father had written, "She's always been high-strung, but lately she's become impossible to please. Nothing we do is ever enough." My mother. "She accused us of not appreciating her after everything we've done. We raised her, put her through college." Kyle. "Remember when she made that big deal about lending me money, acting like she was saving my life when she makes more than enough to help family?" Amanda. "She tried to take over my entire wedding, then complained about the cost. If she couldn't afford it, she shouldn't have offered." The revisionist history was stunning in its completeness. In their version, I was controlling rather than supportive, negative rather than exhausted, manipulative rather than giving. They had transformed every sacrifice I made into an example of my supposed toxic behavior. With trembling fingers, I attempted to respond, "I don't understand where this is coming from. If I upset anyone at Thanksgiving, we could have talked about it privately." The response was swift and unified. My father. "This is exactly the problem. You can't even accept feedback without being defensive." I tried calling my mother directly, but the call went straight to voicemail. Same with my father, Kyle and Amanda. They had coordinated this ambush perfectly, launch the public accusation, then make themselves unavailable for any real conversation. By mid-afternoon, extended family members were texting me directly, some with faux concern, praying for you during this difficult time, and others with unmistakable satisfaction. Family relationships should be equal. You can't control everyone forever. I somehow made it through the workday, though I couldn't recall a single conversation or task I completed. When I finally reached my apartment, I collapsed on the couch, physically ill from the adrenaline and cortisol flooding my system. For hours, I stared at the group chat, watching as more relatives weighed in on my apparent monstrosity. The most bewildering part was how quickly and completely they'd rewritten our family history. In their narrative, I'd never supported Kyle through legal troubles. I'd lorded my financial help over him to control his choices. I'd never sacrificed for Amanda's wedding. I'd hijacked her planning to satisfy my controlling nature. I'd never taken unpaid leave to care for my mother. I'd invaded their home to monitor their activities. Every act of love had been reframed as manipulation. Every sacrifice recast as self-serving. The family I'd given everything to protect had not only abandoned me, but were actively vilifying me to anyone who would listen. Later that evening, my phone lit up with a text, not from the group chat, but a private message from my mother. Your father and I still love you, but we think you need professional help for your issues. When you're ready to apologize to everyone and work on yourself, we can discuss reintegrating you into family events. The clinical coldness of reintegrating broke something fundamental inside me. They were treating me like a defective part that had been removed from the family machine only to be reinstalled after proper repairs. What hurt most wasn't just the rejection, but the complete erasure of reality. I'd spent years carrying their emotional and financial burdens, postponing my own life to support theirs. Now they were not only cutting me off, but convincing themselves and others that I'd been the taker rather than the giver all along. That night, alone in my apartment, surrounded by photos of the family who had discarded me, I experienced a level of abandonment that felt physically crushing. The people who were supposed to love me unconditionally had not only withdrawn that love, but denied it had ever existed in its pure form. The ultimate irony arrived just before midnight, a text from Kyle. Hey, I know things are weird right now, but I have a job interview next week. Could you help me update my resume? No pressure. Even in exile, I was still expected to serve. The week that followed the group message was the darkest of my life. I called in sick to work for the first time in years, unable to focus on anything beyond the gaping wound where my family relationships had been. My apartment, once a sanctuary from family demands, became a prison of rumination. Every corner held reminders, photos from Amanda's wedding, where I stood beaming beside her, despite having maxed out my credit cards to pay for the photographer capturing the image. The throw blanket my mother had given me last Christmas after I spent 3 weekends helping her organize the basement. The coffee mug Kyle had brought me from his only completed semester at community college, which had paid for. Sleep became impossible without medication. When I did manage to drift off, I woke from nightmares where I was screaming explanations to my family while they stared through me as if I were invisible. I lost 8 more pounds in that first week, my clothes hanging from my frame like borrowed garments. The humiliation extended beyond the pain of rejection. Through social media, I discovered extended family members discussing the situation openly. My mother's cousin posted a vague status about toxic people who wear a mask of helpfulness that received likes from several relatives. Amanda's wedding photographer shared previously unreleased photos with captions implying I'd been difficult during the event, a complete fabrication. Most surreal was discovering through a mutual connection that screenshots of the group chat had been shared with neighbors in my parents' community, creating a ripple effect of gossip that reached people I'd known since childhood. My high school friend Melissa texted to ask if I was doing okay after everything with your family, though I hadn't spoken to her about the situation. What exactly did you hear? I asked her. Just that you've been having some issues. Your mom mentioned to my mom that you've been under a lot of pressure and lashing out at everyone. The narrative was spreading like wildfire, each retelling further distorting reality. In their version, I wasn't the victim of financial and emotional exploitation. I was experiencing a psychological breakdown that had made me abusive toward my innocent family. The isolation became suffocating. Friends from my hometown, people I'd known for decades, began treating me with the awkward distance reserved for those with contagious illnesses. I should probably stay neutral. One childhood friend texted when I tried to explain what had really happened. Even some colleagues sensed something was wrong. Family trouble, my assistant asked gently when I returned to work with dark circles under my eyes. I nodded, unable to explain that my family had effectively held a public trial and execution of my character without allowing me to speak in my own defense. The weekends became vast deserts of time. For years, my Saturdays and Sundays had been filled with family obligations, grocery shopping for my parents, helping Kyle with job applications, listening to Amanda complain about wedding planning stress. Now the hours stretched before me, empty and accusing. I tried to fill them with self-care activities recommended by articles on estrangement, meditation, journaling, walks in the park. But each attempt felt hollow, mechanical. How do you meditate when your thoughts continually return to betrayal? How do you journal when writing the truth feels like screaming into a void? How do you enjoy a peaceful walk when your phone might light up any moment with another accusation? The cruelest twist came in the form of continued expectations. Despite being formally stepped away from the family, I still received periodic requests. My father, the lawn service is asking about spring scheduling. You usually handle that. Amanda, do you still have the contact for that graphic designer David needs some work done for his business? Kyle, can you proofread something for me? Not trying to cause drama, just need help. Each message implied the same underlying expectation. While I was too toxic to be included in family gatherings, I was still expected to provide the practical support they'd grown accustomed to. My companionship was dispensable, but my usefulness was not. I didn't respond to these requests, which only generated follow-up messages expressing disappointment in my continued negativity and inability to separate issues. The lowest point came on my birthday 3 weeks after the initial excommunication. For the past 5 years, I'd hosted a dinner party for my family, cooking all day to prepare everyone's favorite dishes. This year, I received exactly 2 birthday wishes, a generic Facebook post from a distant cousin, and a text from my mother that read simply, "Happy birthday. Hope you're taking time to reflect." Sitting alone at my dining table that evening, I opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving for a special occasion and contemplated how thoroughly I'd been erased. My identity had been so entwined with being the family support system that without that role, I felt like a ghost present, but unseen with no substance of my own. That night, I researched apartments in Chicago, Denver, Seattle cities, far from Philadelphia, where I could start over without the shadow of family betrayal. I updated my resume and browsed job listings, imagining a life where no one knew me as the reliable one or the family fixer. I could reinvent myself completely, become someone whose worth wasn't measured by how much she gave to others. As I sat surrounded by printouts of potential escape routes, my phone lit up with a text from an unexpected source, Aunt Margaret. Unlike the rest of the family, she hadn't contributed to the group message pile on, but she hadn't defended me either. Her silence had felt like its own kind of betrayal. Her message was simple. "I'm coming to see you tomorrow. This has gone far enough." I stared at the text, afraid to hope this meant what I thought it might, that someone from my family was finally ready to hear my side of the story. The knock on my apartment door came precisely at noon the following day. I opened it to find Aunt Margaret standing there, her expression a mix of determination and concern. Without waiting for an invitation, she stepped inside and pulled me into a tight hug, the first physical affection I'd received in weeks. "I'm sorry," she whispered fiercely against my hair. "I'm so sorry I didn't stop this sooner." When she pulled back, she studied my face with the intensity of someone memorizing details. "Oh, Brooke, you look exhausted." I gestured vaguely to the living room, suddenly self-conscious about the state of my apartment. Takeout containers cluttered the coffee table, and laundry I hadn't found the energy to fold was piled on the armchair. "I've been better," I admitted, my voice rusty from disuse. Living alone and working remotely had reduced my daily word count to nearly zero. Aunt Margaret didn't wait for further explanation. She marched into the kitchen, filled my electric kettle, and began opening cabinets until she found tea bags. "Sit," she ordered, the familiar no-nonsense tone somehow comforting in its normalcy. I obeyed, watching as she moved efficiently around my kitchen, locating mugs and honey as if she'd been there 100 times before. Minutes later, she placed a steaming mug in front of me and took the seat opposite her eyes, never leaving my face. "What they've done is unconscionable," she said without preamble, "and I want you to know I had no part in it." "You saw the messages," I replied, the hurt still raw. "You didn't say anything." "Not in that chat, no." She reached into her purse and withdrew her phone, pulling up a different conversation. "But I said plenty here." She handed me the phone, showing a private message thread between her and my father. The exchange began the day after the group message. Aunt Margaret: "Thomas, what you've done to Brooke is shameful. That girl has sacrificed everything for this family, and you've repaid her with public humiliation." My father: "You don't know the whole story. She's been increasingly difficult." Aunt Margaret: "Difficult. She took unpaid leave to care for Diana. She emptied her savings for Kyle's legal fees. She paid for half of Amanda's wedding. And you're calling her difficult because she finally asked for some recognition." The conversation continued for pages, with Aunt Margaret systematically dismantling every accusation the family had leveled against me. She had receipts, literal and figurative, documenting years of my contributions and sacrifices. "I should have spoken up sooner," she said, taking the phone back. "But I wanted to gather evidence first. Your father has always been able to steamroll people with his certainty, and I needed to be prepared." She reached into her purse again and produced a manila folder. "Which is why I brought this." Inside were printed bank statements, text message screenshots, and even a handwritten timeline of family events over the past 5 years. Aunt Margaret had been quietly documenting the pattern of exploitation long before I'd recognized it myself. "I confronted them at Sunday dinner last week," she continued, "brought all this evidence and laid it out on the dining room table. Know what your father said?" I shook my head, afraid to hope for any acknowledgement of wrongdoing. "He said you were an adult who made your own choices, and if you regretted those choices now, that was your problem, not theirs." Her voice tightened with anger, as if coercion and manipulation weren't involved at every step. "Did anyone else say anything?" I asked, thinking of my mother, who had at least occasionally expressed gratitude in the past. Aunt Margaret's expression softened with regret. "Your mother cried, of course. Said she never meant to take advantage. But she didn't contradict your father." She paused. "Kyle wasn't there. Amanda left halfway through, saying she wouldn't listen to me tarnish her wedding memories." The disappointment felt like a physical weight on my chest. Even with irrefutable evidence, my family remained entrenched in their narrative. "It's not just me, though," Aunt Margaret continued, reaching for my hand across the table. "4 other relatives have contacted me privately to say they think you're being treated unfairly. Your cousin Michael, your grandmother's sister Ruth, even David's parents. They told Amanda they were appalled by how the family has treated you." A small constellation of support amid the darkness. Not enough to reverse the damage, but enough to validate that I wasn't imagining the injustice. "There's someone else who reached out to me," Aunt Margaret said, her expression softening. "Jake." The name sent a jolt through me. "Jake. My ex, Jake." She nodded. "He saw some cryptic post Amanda made about family drama and connected the dots. He asked for your address, but I said I'd check with you first. He's worried about you, Brooke." Before I could process this information, my phone chimed with a text from Sophia. "Outside with emergency ice cream. Buzz me up." I glanced at Aunt Margaret, who smiled knowingly. "I may have coordinated with your friend. She said you've been declining her invitations." Minutes later, Sophia burst through the door with 2 grocery bags and immediately began organizing what she called Operation Brooke Revival. She unpacked ice cream, face masks, comfort movies, and a bottle of wine. "Reinforcements have arrived," she announced, surveying my apartment with tactical efficiency. "And I'm staying all weekend, so don't even try to argue." That evening, with Aunt Margaret and Sophia flanking me on the couch, I experienced the first moments of genuine connection since the estrangement began. We didn't solve anything or formulate grand plans for reconciliation. Instead, they simply held space for my pain while reminding me I wasn't as alone as I felt. Before leaving, Aunt Margaret gripped my shoulders firmly. "This isn't your fault, Brooke, not one bit of it. Some families can't tolerate when their designated giver starts having needs of her own. That doesn't make your needs any less valid." The following Monday, I returned to work with slightly more energy. My boss stopped by my office, closing the door for privacy. "I don't know what's been going on," she said gently, "but the team has noticed you've been struggling. We want you to know we're here for you." She slid a card across my desk, signed by every member of my department, along with a gift certificate for a day spa. "We took up a collection. You give so much to this company and your clients. Let us give something back." The simple recognition of my contributions, something my family had never managed, brought tears to my eyes. My boss pressed a box of tissues into my hand without comment. "Also," she added before leaving, "that therapist I mentioned when you first joined the company, she's taking new clients. I'll email you her information if you're interested." That afternoon, I made my first therapy appointment. During the intake call, I struggled to summarize what had happened without sounding melodramatic. My family essentially fired me from being their daughter and sister. I finally said the absurdity of it, momentarily overwhelming the pain. "That happens more often than you might think," the therapist replied. "Families often scapegoat the healthiest member, the one who begins to question the dysfunction." Her words were the first in a long series of revelations that would help me understand what had happened, not as a personal failure, but as a predictable response to my growing awareness and boundary setting. By the end of that week, a fragile support network had formed around me. Aunt Margaret checked in daily. Sophia organized a dinner with mutual friends who knew nothing of the family situation but provided much-needed normalcy. My boss reduced my client load temporarily without reducing my pay. Colleagues stepped up to help with projects that had languished during my emotional absence. And then, unexpectedly, Jake called. "I heard what's happening," he said, his familiar voice sending a wave of complicated emotions through me. "I always knew your family took advantage, but this is beyond anything I imagined." We agreed to meet for coffee that weekend, just a conversation between two people with shared history, no expectations attached. But his call reinforced what Aunt Margaret and Sophia had been telling me: people who truly cared about me could see the truth of the situation even when my family couldn't. For the first time since reading that devastating group message, I slept through the night without medication. The pain hadn't disappeared, but it had shifted slightly, making room for something new. The possibility that I deserved better than what my family had offered, and that perhaps better actually existed out in the world waiting for me to claim it. The healing didn't happen overnight. There was no single moment of revelation that instantly transformed my grief into strength. Instead, recovery came in small increments, tiny decisions and realizations that gradually accumulated into a new way of living. My first session with Dr. Winters, the therapist my boss had recommended, established the framework that would guide my healing. "What you're experiencing is ambiguous loss," she explained. "Your family is still physically present in the world, but emotionally they've withdrawn the connection you once shared. It's similar to grief, but without the closure that comes with a clear ending." We met twice weekly at first, untangling the complex web of family dynamics that had led to my role as the perpetual giver, Dr. Winters introduced me to concepts like emotional incest, my mother's inappropriate reliance on me for emotional support, golden child scapegoat dynamics, my siblings' preferential treatment versus my expected perfection, and most importantly, family systems theory. The idea that families resist change to maintain homeostasis, often scapegoating members who threaten the established order. "By setting boundaries and expressing needs, you disrupted the system," she explained. "The family united against you not because you're wrong, but because your growth threatens their equilibrium." This perspective helped me understand that the group message wasn't a random act of cruelty, but the predictable response of a dysfunctional system desperately trying to restore its balance by removing the problematic element, me. Outside therapy, I began the practical work of building boundaries. 2 weeks after our initial reunion, Jake suggested we try again this time with clearer expectations. "I understand now what you were dealing with," he said. "I'd like to see who you become when you're not carrying your entire family." We started slowly casual dinners, weekend outings, conversations that extended late into the evening. Without the constant interruptions of family emergencies, I discovered a capacity for presence I'd never experienced before. For the first time, my attention wasn't divided between the person before me and the inevitable crisis brewing on my phone. The family attempts to pull me back began predictably. Almost exactly 2 months after the group message, my father sent a private text. "Your mother and I have discussed the situation. We're willing to forgive your behavior if you're ready to apologize and rejoin the family." The message contained all the familiar manipulative elements, the implication that I'd been the wrongdoer, the positioning of their forgiveness as a generous gift, the subtle suggestion that my absence was a temporary condition rather than their mandated exclusion. In the past, I'd have responded immediately, crafting a careful reply designed to smooth things over while protecting my dignity. This time, I showed the message to Dr. Winters before responding. "What do you want to say?" she asked. "That they're the ones who should be apologizing. That I didn't do anything wrong. That I won't come crawling back just because they've decided I'm useful again." She nodded. "Those are valid feelings. Would expressing them help you harm you or make no difference to your healing right now?" The question gave me pause. I realized responding from a place of justified anger would only entangle me further in their dynamic. I think I need more time before engaging at all." I didn't respond to my father, a small act of self-determination that felt revolutionary. When no response came, he escalated with another text 3 days later. "Your silence is very hurtful to your mother." Again, I chose not to engage. The pattern continued, texts from my father, then my mother, then Amanda, each designed to provoke a response through different emotional triggers. Guilt, obligation, fear, nostalgia. They deployed every tool that had successfully manipulated me in the past. Kyle took a different approach, texting as if nothing had happened. "Hey, got a job interview at Thompson Media. Could you look at my resume? I made some changes." This request for practical help without any acknowledgement of the estrangement revealed how completely they'd separated my usefulness from my personhood. I was expected to continue providing services while accepting exclusion from the emotional benefits of family. With each non-response, I reclaimed a small piece of my autonomy. Dr. Winters called this developing response flexibility, the ability to choose reactions based on my well-being rather than conditioned family roles. The extended family reactions varied wildly. Some continued the shunning, unfriending me on social media and avoiding eye contact when we crossed paths in town. Others reached out awkwardly, uncertain how to navigate the rift. My grandmother's birthday approached, raising questions about who would attend and how interactions would be managed. Aunt Margaret became my intelligence network, keeping me informed without forcing contact. "Your parents told everyone not to discuss the situation with you directly," she reported after one family gathering. "They're framing your absence as a mental health break you're taking, implying you've had some kind of breakdown." Rather than fighting this narrative, I focused on building the life that had been on hold for years. I reactivated my dormant photography hobby, spending Saturdays exploring Philadelphia with my camera instead of running family errands. I joined a book club that met monthly, forming connections based on shared interests rather than obligation. Most significantly, I reclaimed financial independence. With the help of a financial advisor, I created a debt repayment plan for the credit cards I'd maxed out funding family needs. I established a true emergency fund that was for my emergencies only. I researched retirement options to rebuild what I'd withdrawn for Kyle's legal fees. My career, which had plateaued during my years of divided attention, began thriving again. I pursued a professional certification I'd postponed 3 times due to family demands, opening new opportunities for advancement. My boss noticed the change immediately. "You've got your spark back," she observed after I presented a particularly innovative campaign strategy. Jake and I continued rebuilding our relationship, deepening in ways that had been impossible before. "I feel like I'm getting to know you for the first time," he said one evening as we cooked dinner together in his apartment. "The real you, not the perpetually exhausted family firefighter version." 4 months after the estrangement began, we decided to move in together, finding a sunlit apartment halfway between our offices. The day we signed the lease, Jake squeezed my hand and said, "This is the beginning we should have had 2 years ago." My relationship with Sophia transformed as well. "Do you realize this is the first time in our entire friendship you've called me with good news instead of a family crisis?" she asked after I told her about a work achievement. The observation stunned me. I'd been so consumed with family problems that I'd neglected to share my joys. Even my physical health improved dramatically. The insomnia that had plagued me for years subsided. My appetite returned, and with it the weight I'd lost during the worst of the estrangement. The stress-related digestive issues that I'd accepted as normal disappeared entirely. The most challenging aspect of healing was handling unexpected contacts from family. 6 months after the group message, my mother appeared unannounced at my office building, intercepting me as I returned from lunch. "We need to talk about your father's birthday dinner," she said without preamble, as if we'd spoken yesterday rather than half a year ago. I felt the familiar pull of obligation, the automatic calculation of how to manage her expectations while preserving my sanity. Instead, I took a deep breath and said, "I'm not comfortable discussing this without addressing what happened in December." Her expression shifted from expectation to discomfort. "That was so long ago, Brooke. Can't we move forward?" "Moving forward requires acknowledgement and amends," I replied, echoing Dr. Winter's words. "I'm open to reconciliation, but not to pretending nothing happened." She left without resolution, visibly frustrated by my refusal to slip back into familiar patterns. The interaction was painful, but represented significant progress. I'd maintained boundaries, despite the powerful urge to accommodate. Similar encounters followed. Amanda invited me to a baby shower, then became indignant when I suggested we have coffee first to discuss our relationship. Kyle asked to stay at my apartment during a job interview, expressing shock when I recommended a hotel instead. My father left a voicemail about Thanksgiving plans, as if my attendance were assumed. Each time I responded with the same message: I was open to rebuilding relationships, but only with honest conversation about what had happened, and clear agreements about future interactions. Their uniform unwillingness to engage on these terms told me everything I needed to know about the likelihood of genuine reconciliation. They wanted the old Brooke back, the one who gave endlessly without requiring reciprocity. The new version, with her inconvenient boundaries and expectations of mutual respect, was not what they had signed up for. As the 1-year anniversary of the estrangement approached, I realized something profound. I was happier, healthier, and more fulfilled than had been in my entire adult life. The family I'd given everything to maintain had cut me off, and paradoxically, that severance had set me free. 1 year after receiving that devastating group message, my life had transformed in ways I couldn't have imagined during those dark December days. The most visible change was my living situation. Jake and I had settled into our apartment, creating a home that reflected both our individual tastes and shared values. Unlike my previous space, which had functioned primarily as a way station between family obligations, this home vibrated with life. Friends gathered around our dining table for game nights. Weekends were filled with exploration rather than duty. For the first time, I understood what it meant to have a true sanctuary, a place where expectations extended only to mutual care and respect. My relationship with Jake deepened into something I hadn't known was possible. "You used to disappear even when you were sitting right beside me," he observed one evening. "Part of you was always waiting for the next family crisis, always on call." Now we shared a presence that felt almost luxurious in its completeness. When we disagreed, we navigated conflict directly rather than through the avoidance patterns I'd learned in my family. When we connected, the joy wasn't shadowed by impending interruption. My professional life flourished in unexpected ways. The energy previously consumed by family drama now fueled creative initiatives that caught the attention of agency leadership. 6 months after the estrangement, I received a promotion to executive creative director overseeing campaigns for our largest clients. My boss cited my renewed focus and innovative thinking in the recommendation letter. The financial recovery took longer but showed steady progress. Each debt repayment felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. I established automatic transfers to rebuild my emergency fund and retirement accounts, reversing the financial damage of years of family loans. For the first time since college, I created a budget that prioritized my needs and goals rather than accommodating emergency requests from relatives. My relationship with my Aunt Margaret evolved from occasional confidant to chosen family. We established a standing Sunday brunch date, building the kind of mutual supportive relationship I'd always craved from my mother. "You know," she told me during one of these brunches, "watching you rebuild your life has inspired me to make some changes of my own." At 62, she had enrolled in a master's program she'd postponed for decades while raising her own family. Sophia and 3 other close friends formed what we jokingly called my replacement family council. Unlike my biological family, this chosen family operated on principles of reciprocity and respect. When I needed help moving into the new apartment, they arrived with boxes and pizza without being asked. When one of them faced a crisis, I could offer support without being drained dry, maintaining healthy boundaries while still being genuinely present. The most profound transformation, however, occurred internally. Through continued work with Dr. Winters, I recognized how completely I'd internalized the role of family savior, measuring my worth by how much I sacrificed for others. "The most insidious part of family dysfunction," she explained, "is how it teaches us to participate in our own exploitation." Gradually, I developed a sense of identity separate from usefulness, the radical notion that I had inherent value beyond what I could provide to others. This shift manifested in 100 small ways: saying no without guilt, expressing preferences without apology, allowing myself to rest without productivity justifications. My contact with my immediate family remained minimal and carefully boundaried. After 9 months of estrangement, my mother initiated the first tentative steps toward reconciliation. "I miss you," she texted on my birthday. "I'd like to have coffee sometime, just the two of us." Unlike previous overtures that had ignored the estrangement, this message acknowledged our separation without blame. After consulting with Dr. Winters, I agreed to meet in a neutral location, a cafe midway between our homes. The conversation was awkward and halting, but represented genuine progress. "I didn't realize how much we relied on you," my mother admitted, twisting her napkin. "When you stopped being available for everything, it felt like abandonment rather than boundaries." She stopped short of a full apology, but acknowledged that the group message had been handled badly. We parted with an agreement to try occasional phone calls, a small step toward a new kind of relationship, one with clearer expectations and more equal exchange. My father remained entrenched in his position, unwilling to acknowledge any wrongdoing. Kyle made sporadic contact, usually when he needed something, while Amanda maintained almost complete silence, especially after announcing her pregnancy, and receiving only a polite congratulatory card rather than offers of financial and practical support. The extended family gradually sorted themselves into those who supported my autonomy and those who preferred the family narrative of my supposed instability. My grandparents, after initial alignment with my parents, began calling occasionally, careful to avoid discussing the situation, but maintaining connection. 2 cousins who had joined the pile-on in the group chat eventually sent apologies, admitting they'd reacted without understanding the full context. Aunt Margaret kept me informed of significant family events without pressure to attend. "Your mother mentioned you might come to the Christmas gathering this year," she reported during our November brunch date. "I told her that was entirely your decision and shouldn't be assumed." When Christmas approached, I made the difficult but empowering decision not to attend the family gathering. Instead, Jake and I hosted a chosen family celebration at our apartment, inviting friends who were also separated from biological family by distance, estrangement, or choice. The day was filled with laughter, good food, and genuine connection, everything family gatherings should be, but rarely had been in my experience. In April, Jake proposed during a weekend trip to the Poconos, a simple, heartfelt moment that perfectly reflected our relationship. "I love who you've become," he said as he offered the ring, "and I love that you've allowed me to really know you." My acceptance wasn't shadowed by calculations about family reactions or wedding obligations. For once, a major life decision centered entirely on what I wanted rather than how it would affect others. Perhaps the most unexpected development was my growing involvement with a support group for family estrangement. What began as seeking help for myself evolved into offering guidance to others just beginning their journey. Sharing my experience, the pain, the guilt, the eventual freedom helped newer members navigate their own complex emotions. Being a family martyr isn't strength. I told a woman whose situation eerily mirrored my own. It's a learned trauma response. Real strength is having the courage to step away from relationships that demand everything and give nothing. These words spoken to comfort someone else crystallized my own hard-won wisdom. The past year had taught me that genuine love doesn't require self-erasure, that boundaries aren't selfishness but self-respect, that relationships worth having are those that celebrate rather than exploit your strength. On the exact anniversary of the group message, I wrote a letter to my former self, the woman who had received that text and felt her world collapse. "The family that cut you off did you an unintentional favor," I wrote. "They freed you from the exhausting performance of earning love that should have been freely given." I didn't send the letter to anyone. It wasn't meant for my family's eyes or even for the validation of my supporters. It was simply an acknowledgement of how far I'd come from a woman who believed her worth depended on what she gave to others, to one who understood her inherent value couldn't be measured in sacrifice. The journey wasn't complete, of course. Healing rarely follows a neat linear path. Some days still brought waves of grief for the family relationships I'd longed for, but never truly had. Some nights still found me awake replaying old conversations and imagining different outcomes, but these moments no longer defined me. They were simply weather patterns moving through the much larger landscape of a life reclaimed, a life built on the radical premise that I deserved reciprocity, respect, and love that didn't come with conditions. Have you ever had to walk away from a relationship that was draining you dry? Or perhaps you're currently struggling with family members who take more than they give. I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more content about setting boundaries and finding your worth beyond what you do for others. Remember, the family that truly deserves you is the one that celebrates rather than exploits your strength. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you the courage to create the life you deserve, surrounded by people who truly see and value you.